Hi everyone, I'm going to do a video because I am a little bit more of a visual processor, and I'm going to try and keep this short while addressing all three aspects of the discussion, so wish me luck. So the four levels are actually pretty straightforward based on the way Kirkpatrick presented them. Level 1 was the reaction of the participants. Level 2 was the learning. Level 3 was behavior, and level 4 were the results. And they're fairly straightforward and intuitive. Reaction basically examines to the extent to which participants felt that they were engaged with the content, that it was relevant to their job, and that they had a favorable opinion of the training in general. Learning, again, fairly straightforward, refers to whether the participants actually learned what you wanted them to learn from the training that you provided. Behavior goes a little bit deeper. Behavior is specifically asking the question whether that learning actually translated into changes in behavior in the workplace. And then results is looking at whether hopefully, assuming that behaviors did change, whether those behaviors are actually making changes to those key indicators that you were targeting so that you could achieve the organizational outcomes that you had laid out at the beginning of your instructional design process. So first of all, I felt that this model was fairly straightforward, very intuitive, and very easy to apply and explain to even a layperson. So as an instructional designer, I could see explaining the relevance and need to do this type of evaluation to a person who is not familiar with the instructional design process at all, and showing why it could be a valuable tool and valuable data to have. So in that sense, I thought it was this was great. Looking at the other models, I also saw why it seems so much easier and intuitive for people to kind of pick this up and start applying it as a way to evaluate programs, because when you start looking at different ways of evaluating programs, these four levels or components are actually the crux, I think, of the type of information anyone would want about a training program. Obviously, you can evaluate other things as part of an evaluation, but I think these four are critical to include in any type of evaluation that you conduct for any type of program that involves learning targeted towards specific goals. So that brings us now to how they are connected. So first, I'm going to run through how I think they are connected, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience and what I see as some issues, or not necessarily issues, but definitely some areas that might seem like they're difficult to assess using this evaluation framework. So the first thing is that this evaluation model is specifically focused on the learner or participant. And so when you start examining this model, you notice that level 1 and 2, the reaction and sorry, I'm losing my words. The reaction and the learning are fairly straightforward. So when you are talking about reaction, the very first thing that comes up is engagement, relevance, and satisfaction. And then the second thing that comes up is whether the learner got the skills that you wanted them to retain from this learning experience. And of course, it's not working as fast as I'd like to. So with level 2, we're looking at knowledge and skills, attitude, confidence, and commitment. And then these two, I think, go hand in hand. I think while they're definitely different components that represent different ideas, I think it's kind of hard to separate them out. I think when you're looking at one, you kind of intuitively have to look at the other. The next component that comes is whether the this learning that you achieved in the training program, and I'm imagining in this scenario you're talking about the face-to-face instance or the online instance where a learner is interacting with either a facilitator or the content in some manner. you're actually moving here now into the workplace and seeing whether these skills, this learning, actually translates into behavior in the workplace. And not just any behavior, but sustained changes to behavior that are in line with the targeted indicators that hopefully you use to design your training. Now, the key with Kirkpatrick is that he also talked about, and I think this is a newer layer, is that these changes to behavior can't just happen in isolation. They have to happen with support, whether it's through coaching, mentoring, embedded job aids, or some type of ongoing support to make sure that these behaviors are sustained over time. Once those behaviors start happening and sufficient time has passed, then we start looking at the results. And when you are looking at the results, you start looking at the indicators to measure how effective these behaviors right here are. If your indicators were chosen correctly, and this is the key, because you can choose indicators that do not necessarily correlate with the behaviors you are trying to measure. If your leading indicators are accurately measuring the behavior that you were targeting with your learning over here, and they are aligned with the outcomes, then you should start seeing results in the direction that you were hoping to see them. Another element is that throughout this process, there should be some type of formative assessment to make sure that any minor adjustments that you might need to make sure that you are in line with your overall objectives and outcomes at the organizational level are correct. And if you look at this, it should seem fairly familiar to what the textbook had, because I didn't really think that it was, that graphic was bad. I thought it was actually very, very good. Okay, so now we're going to go into the nitty-gritty. So for this assignment, the third component of the question was, have we conducted or participated a program evaluation? So I have worked in several different organizations in which I have worked as someone who has to design and deliver training and to a degree evaluate that training for its effectiveness. In every organization that I have been in, I can definitely say that we have targeted levels 1 and 2. And in fact, when I have done surveys to evaluate a program or training, the questions tend to target level 1 and 2. And in my experience, there are 2 reasons for that. One, these are generally easy questions to ask. You can do very easy surveys with yes, no, or a Likert scale of whether you agree or disagree with this statement. And they are usually fairly visible. So I think it's very easy for someone to automatically say whether a training is relevant to what they do, and it is very easy to say whether you were satisfied with the training that you received. It's also really easy to measure knowledge and skills. The issues that I have seen in practice of evaluating programs is with engagement, attitude, confidence, and commitment. And I feel that these are 4 areas where what you see is not always how things are. So from an observer standpoint, I know typically when I'm doing training, I will look out at a sea of faces and everyone seems disengaged. And I think I am just tanking and that this is the worst training ever. However, more often than not, when I talk to participants afterwards, they come up to me and tell me that they thought the training was relevant, that they were really excited, that they really enjoyed it, that they felt it was really useful, that they were so glad that they finally received this type of training. And so based on their outward affect, I would have had no idea that they were engaged. And I feel it's the same thing with attitude, confidence, and commitment. Someone may seem like they have a very good or bad attitude, and that actually not be the case. Someone may seem like they are acting with confidence when actually they are really scared and are unsure of the actions that they are taking. And I see this a lot with technology training. There's a lot of people who are just doing things because they don't want to seem like they don't know how to do something. But if you really sit down and talk with them, they will eventually reveal that they have no idea what they're doing and that they're scared about what they're doing. And then commitment, whether they really believe in it. And the reason why I have some issues with these three is I feel that even in surveys that you do, unless you are completely assured of complete anonymity, I feel that a lot of people feel that their responses are being monitored. And so if they want their bosses to have a favorable opinion of them, then they need to answer in positive ways to show that they were on board with the company mission, because that somehow could affect their performance reviews or even their pay, depending on what type of organization that you are with. So that is with level 1 and 2. Where I feel program evaluations start breaking down, I think, is with behavior and support. I have seen so many different organizations who focus on level 1 and 2 and then the results. But they do not pay attention to this. Now, if your training program is targeting fairly simple skills or behaviors, then I think you could probably get away with minimal support. However, if the training is regarding aspects of behavior in the workplace that are very complex and nuanced, this level 3 part becomes really, really important. And if you do not have coaching, if you do not have support in the form of job aids or some person on staff who is providing regular feedback to let the staff know that what they are doing is correct, and then allowing them the opportunity to learn through their mistakes and their successes, then this behavior is either going to be a change in behavior that is probably not quite right, or there are going to be behaviors that are actually incorrect or not sustained. And so I have seen in a lot of organizations neglect this aspect of training. Then we come to level 4. I feel very strongly that in education, level 4 is one of the most looked at or evaluated sections. However, I do not feel that it is done well. In education, we use a lot of data. We use graduation rates. We use test scores. We use how many students are going into college, how many students are taking AP tests, how many students are earning college credit while they're in high school or passing their classes, or any other type of metric that is tied to specific quantifiable data. However, I think the quantized data doesn't always address some of the behaviors. So for example, how can you use a quantifier to show that a teacher is changing the classroom culture that is more positive? Yes, you can look at indicators like the number of referrals and different things like that, or behavior issues for a specific teacher or campus. But a lot of these changes are very slow over time, and they have a very slow growth, and they're hard to pinpoint. And usually when you're making these types of changes, you're seeing changes in a lot of different little areas. So they're very difficult to quantify. And so I feel that sometimes when you're dealing with some of the more softer skills, where some of the really hard work in changing behaviors I think that gets left out of the indicators because you can't quantify it and measure it as easily, because those types of evaluations require time and observation and discussion and feedback and all kinds of things that people, especially in really large organizations, don't feel that they have time for. So the other part of the question was which levels I have done. So I obviously have done level 1 and 2. To a degree, I have done kind kind of evaluating the changes in behavior as a coach, one of my jobs is to do training and then provide the support that comes after on an ongoing manner. And then try and look for key indicators to assess those outcomes. Unfortunately, because our organization is so large, I don't always have access to the data I need, and I have to kind of be creative in how I collect data to kind of really assess whether the indicators really mean what I think they mean. So a lot of it is sort of informal assessment of how I think progress is going. So for the levels that are being assessed less frequently, I definitely feel that 1, 2, and 4 are assessed the most frequently, not necessarily correctly, and then the one that is neglected is behavior with support. I do think that finding a way to evaluate a program effectively and efficiently and accurately is a great skill, and I am sure there's a way to do it, and I'm really excited to find out how I can improve in assessing all 4 levels, because I think improvements can be made in all areas, and I would definitely like some ideas to kind of inform my own work as I work with staff. So this is a really exciting project. I hope that you have some questions or comments. I welcome all positive, negative, or neutral feedback or questions. And in particular, I really want to know what you guys think about some of the other evaluation models and whether you thought any of them were better than Kirkpatrick's model, because I've been reading more about them, and they are really, really interesting. Also, instructional design. How do you think this fits into our roles as instructional leaders? So, come on, give it to me.